In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as night the day. Thou canst not then be false to anyone. In the play Hamlet by William Shakespeare, there is a character named Laertes who is a soldier in the army of the king. Laertes' father is named Polonius and an experienced man. Laertes is about to go to war for his king and country. And before he goes to war, he goes to his father Polonius and asks him for some bits of advice. Besides the many other beautiful things that his father tells him, his father also says this: this above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as night the day. Thou canst not then be false to anyone. If you're true to yourself, that is all that matters. And so we enter, my brothers, into the meditation on sin. And immediately after the principle and foundation, it might seem quite surprising, even absurd, that one would be meditating on sin. And one might ask, but Jesus in the Gospels never focused on sin. His prime focus was on repentance. So why do we need to focus on sin? Is it to arouse feelings of guilt and shame? Is it to make us feel less than we really are? Is it that we will become aware of our deficiencies and our defects? And the response to all of these questions is a resounding no. It is not for these reasons. Then what is the reason why we focus on sin? A look at the newspapers on any given day will show us the amount of space which is given to dishonesty, to corruption, to rape, to murder, to thievery, to caste distinctions, and to so many other kinds of negatives. As a matter of fact, so many television channels and social media thrives on this kind of news because this is what attracts people. And sometimes we wonder when we read the newspaper and are only reading about dishonesty and corruption and murder and rape, if there is anything else going on in the world. And if there is anything else that newspaper and television and other social media reporters have anything else to report about. But the reality is that we are living in a broken world. And we are very much part of that brokenness. And so, while the world is in need of healing, it is each one of us first who is in that need of healing. In his book, The Gulag Archipelago, the wonderful author Alexander Solzhenitsyn says this: if only it were all so simple. If only there were evil people everywhere, insidiously committing acts of evil, and it were necessary to take those people, put them in a cage, and lock the door. He goes on to say, but the line dividing good and evil cuts through every human heart. Cuts through every human heart. And which of us is willing to take out a part of our hearts and put it in that cage? If we were to put evil in a cage, every single one of us would have had to take out a part of our hearts and put it in that cage, because evil rests in every human heart. And that is why the mystic can say, there, but for the grace of God go I. And Paul can say, everyone has sinned. Everyone has sinned. So we are living in this broken world. We are living in this world which has been tattered and made, rent apart by our jealousy, by our resentment, by our anger, and by our giving vent to all of that in action. A young girl in grade 3 was asked by her school teacher, if all the good people in the world were black in color and all the bad people in the world were white in color, what color would you be? And the little girl answered without any hesitation, teacher, I would be gray. And the fact is, all of us would be gray. Every single one of us would be gray, because we would be both good and bad. We would have both good and evil, because every one of us carries within ourselves that evil, that brokenness which is in need of healing. In order to take us through what this brokenness is and how we can at least attempt to attain such healing, I want to take you through the Gospel of John, chapter 5, verses 1 to 9. John chapter 5, verses 1 to 9, the story of the healing of a paralytic at the pool of Bethesda or Bethsaida or Bethesda. The Gospel of John is a special gospel, because almost every phrase in John has a deeper meaning than the phrase might appear to have at first reading. This is a very, very beautiful text in which we can apply our senses. I will try to take you through this text in such a manner that you can apply your senses to the text. And you might choose, even as you apply your senses, to be any of the characters that I will mention. And then act out the role of that character. Act out what that character is saying, what that character is doing, what that character is thinking and feeling. This is how John chapter 5, verse 1 begins. After this, there was a festival. Now, John deliberately does not tell us the name of the festival, because John wants to use this festival or feast as an occasion for a revelation of Jesus. I believe that there are some who miss the point in trying to identify the festival. So some say it was the festival of the Passover. Others say it was the festival of Pentecost. Others say it was the festival of Purim. No, it seems by not telling us which festival it was, John does not want us to speculate. If he wanted us to speculate, he would have told us, like he does at other times. Now he simply says, after this there was a feast, or after this there was a festival. In John, however, feasts and festivals are moments when a certain aspect of this very rich personality of Jesus is revealed. In John chapter 6, for example, at the feeding of the 5,000, it is the festival of the Passover. And there, Jesus reveals himself as the bread of life. He feeds 5,000 with bread and then reveals himself as the bread of life. In John chapter 7, at the festival of the booths or the tabernacles, Jesus reveals himself as the living water and the light of the world in chapter 8. So we notice that there is an identification with the festival and a revelation of an aspect of the personality. Here, however, it seems to me that John deliberately does not tell us which festival it was, because the aspect of the personality of Jesus which is going to be revealed is an enormous aspect, is a mysterious aspect, is an aspect of Jesus who comes to us in our hour of need. And that is why there is no specific aspect of the personality. It is Jesus, the ever available Lord. So Jesus is not, like in chapter 7 verse 37 of John, the living water, or in chapter 8 verse 12, the light of the world, or in chapter 6 verse 4 and 35, the bread of life. No, he is now here at this festival which is not named, the Lord who keeps coming to our aid. And every one of us have had the privilege of being present at some great festival or another. In whichever place we are, in whichever place we have been, we have had this experience. And what do we notice during festivals? We notice large crowds. And those large crowds have different agenda. Some will go to worship, some will go to the fair, some will go to visit relatives, some will go to sightsee. Each one has their own agenda. And even as we apply our senses to this particular story, if we intend to be one of those who is walking with Jesus, we walk along with Jesus. And we notice his footsteps. How is he dressed? What is the look on his face? Does he seem determined? Does he know where he is going? Are his strides long or short? Is he looking around him, or is he looking straight ahead as he walks? What kind of dress is he wearing? How is his hair? Does he have a beard? If he does, how does the beard look? And we keep walking with him. And Jesus comes to Jerusalem, and he goes not to the temple, he goes not to the fair, he goes not to visit relatives, but he goes to the place where possibly he was most needed. And I think it is true, as we will see in a moment. John goes through great pains to describe the scene so we can really put ourselves into the scene. The evangelist will talk about the sheep gate. He will talk about the pool. He will talk about the 5 porticos, all mentioned in order that we might be able to put ourselves into this situation. And what is happening here at the sheep gate and in the pool where there are 5 porticos? There are a number of invalids, a number of sick people. And we picture Jesus, if we are by his side, looking at those sick. And even as Jesus looks, John identifies 3 kinds of invalids: the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. I'm going to add 2 more, and I'll tell you why. John mentions the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. Now, why does John not mention the deaf? Why does he not mention the dumb? It's quite likely there would have been deaf mutes among that group. It's likely there would have been deaf people with impediments in their speech. It is likely there would have been people who could possibly speak but not hear. So why does John not mention the deaf and the dumb or the deaf mutes? Because with the naked eye, you can see clearly when a person is blind. With the naked eye, you can identify a lame or a paralyzed person. But with the naked eye, you cannot identify a dumb person unless the person begins to speak or tries to speak, and then you realize the person is dumb. You cannot identify a deaf person unless you speak and you realize the person has not heard you at all. So even though John mentions 3 kinds of invalids, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed, I would add 2 more for our reflection. And the first is the blind. The moment we hear the word blind, our minds will possibly go to those who cannot see with the external eyes, the eyes of the head. Those who are disabled with their sight. This is external blindness. This is only one kind of blindness. And even as we reflect on this external blindness, we reflect because we are blessed to have eyesight and we can see with the eyes of our head. We reflect on our internal blindness. Our blindness to another person's need, our blindness to another person's point of view. Have I closed my mind? Have I made my heart blind to the needs of others? Where even though I have external sight, I prefer not to see. Have I closed my mind to another person's point of view because it is too challenging for me? It is different from mine and I don't agree with it. So while I might be able to see and quite clearly with the eyes of my head, I might have wonderful external sight. I might be lacking in sight of the heart. So am I a person who looks also with the eyes of the heart, or do I only focus on what I can see with the eyes of my head? The second kind of sick person is the one who is lame. And while we might be blessed with the use of our limbs and of our feet, we might still be lame because of our lethargy, because of our laziness, because everything is provided for us. We don't need to really struggle and to strain. And so we can afford to take it easy. We can afford not to put in a whole day's work. We can afford to relax and have time for ourselves. We want our space. This is our own lameness. We have become experts at procrastination. We have become experts at dragging ourselves through life because of some past negative experience. We have become experts of moving around on crutches, and those crutches are our aid. There was once a young boy who met with an accident. And as part of the treatment, after the doctors had fixed the leg once again, which had been fractured, they gave him a pair of crutches so that he would not put too much of pressure on that leg, which had been hurt and which was healing. But he was young, so the healing was very, very quick and took place very quickly. But the mother of the boy was very, very protective. Instead, she was overprotective. And so on their visit to the doctor saw the leg had healed well. So he told the mother, now is the time when your son must give up his crutches. He must give them up and he must learn to walk. Let him not put too much of pressure. Let him not overdo it, but he must learn to walk without the crutches. Because this mother was so overprotected, she said, no, doctor, I am not going to take a risk. I want my son to use those crutches so that he doesn't hurt himself. The doctor pleaded with the mother not to do that because it would be dangerous. But the mother would not listen. She would pay no heed. And the boy continued to use the crutches. 3 months had passed and the boy was still using the crutches. 4 months had passed and the boy was still using the crutches. After some time, the boy's leg had healed completely, but because he was not using that leg and using the crutches, the leg would refuse to stand on its own. And he went through life using the crutches, even though he was not really lame. This is what can happen to us. We drag ourselves through life because we've had some negative experience, because we think we have been shortchanged, because we think we may not have been given our due. We just proceed with life without any kind of enthusiasm, without any kind of motive, without any kind of direction. We just go through the motions of life. And we can afford to do that because we are Jesuits. Who is to challenge me? Who is to ask me? Who is to take me to task? Who will dare ask me a question if I don't pull my weight? And the third kind of invalid which John mentions is the paralyzed. Paralysis may be translated psychologically as fear. Fear paralyzes. It grips us so much that we are afraid of our own shadows. And as our own Indian philosophers will tell us, fear is Maya. It's not real. It's an illusion. There is nothing which need frighten me. And yet I am so frightened. I'm so terrified that I can hardly move. And this fear, which I will talk about in a separate session, is of a variety of kinds, and every one of us is frightened. Some of us are frightened because of the positions we hold. Others are frightened because we hold no positions. So in other words, every single one of us has got this fear, and this fear does not allow us to be the kind of persons that we are meant to be. And even though John does not mention these two kinds of invalids, the deaf, I ask myself, about my own deafness. My deafness, not with the external ears of my head, with which I might be able to hear very well. But I ask myself about my deafness to what is going on around me. I am not concerned at all. It makes no difference to me, no matter how loud the cries are outside of me. I am unconcerned. I am not perturbed at all. And there are cries of children, and there are cries of women, and there are cries of orphans, and there are cries of the poor, and there are cries of the marginalized, and it means nothing to me. I have become deaf. I turn a deaf ear to their pleas. And even though I might have a tongue, and even though I might be a very, very eloquent speaker, when the time comes for me to speak, when I have to take a stand, then I'm dumb. Why? I don't want to get into trouble. There was a man who was very, very anxious to learn how to swim. But he was afraid of the water. He was afraid of the water. And the coach whom he hired to teach him how to swim said, come on inside. The water is not dangerous. I am here. I will protect you. I will make sure that nothing happens to you. But the man would not even touch the water with his toes. So we are like that man. We want to learn how to swim, but we do not want to step into the water. We are too afraid to speak up. What will happen to me? What will happen to me if I speak up? If I say, I will not get this position, I will not get that position, so better to remain quiet. If I speak up about what is happening around me, I am scared because there will be violence, and I'm scared of violence. And so, my brothers, while John mentions the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed, I would like us also to reflect on my own deafness and on my own blindness and my own inability to speak, my dumbness. And even as Jesus comes there, he possibly sees all of these variety of invalids. And he notices one man. The text does not tell us why Jesus looks at this man. And if you want to change your role now, if you want to change the role which you are playing, you can be that man. This is what I term as divine choice. The Lord chooses whom the Lord wants to choose. And we notice why possibly John tells us. He saw this man and he knew he had been lying there a long time. And before that, John the evangelist has told us there was a man who was paralyzed and had been paralyzed for 38 years. And there are 2 points which John makes. First, that he was paralyzed for 38 years. He does not really say that he was near the pool for 38 years, but he could have been. He could have been. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. So it's likely that he was ill for 38 years and had come to the pool. But no matter when he had come to the pool, he could not do the one thing necessary to save himself, that is, jump into the water. Verse 4, chapter 5, verse 4 is not in many of the good manuscripts, where the angel stirred the water and the one who jumped in first was the one who was saved. It could be like the spas, that you are saved, you are healed from skin ailments. But more importantly, it could have been the faith with which a person went into the water, the faith which was responsible for the healing. But this man was near the brink of the pool. He was near the brink of salvation. He was at the edge of salvation. And the angel is stirring the water according to that text, which is not in the best manuscripts. And somebody jumps in, and they jump in before this man. And Jesus saw him and knew he had been lying there a long time. So 38 is mentioned by John to indicate that it was an extraordinarily long period of time. Already by telling us about this foreknowledge of Jesus, John is preparing us in order to witness something extraordinary. And we ask, were there other people who may have been more in need than this man? We don't know. The text does not say. The text, however, tells us as we go through it that this man seemed to have no one to help him. And this is something which you can possibly resonate with. Whom do I turn to? Whom do I ask? Whom do I approach? Who will guide me? I have been caught up in this situation. I've been caught up in my negativity. I've been caught up in my blindness, in my lameness, in my paralysis, in my deafness and dumbness. I've been so caught up. But who will release me? Because everybody else around me is in the same boat as I am. All my companions, all my community members, the whole province is in the same boat. Nobody seems to be able to see properly. Nobody seems to be able to move with both their limbs. So whom to approach? 38 years. So it shows the hopelessness of the situation. It is a totally hopeless situation. There seems to be no hope at all. And Jesus approaches this man, and he approaches him as a friend. And because he approaches him as a friend, and that's why I said John does not tell us what festival it was, he approaches him as someone who comes to him in his hour of need. Not the living water, not the light of the world, not the bread of life. He comes as a friend, as someone who can make him whole. And Jesus asks him a question. There are two reasons why the question is asked. And the first is that Jesus will not impose himself. Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, one of my very favorite texts to show how God deals with us. Behold, I stand at your door and knock. This means that God takes the initiative. God has come to the door of my life. He takes an even further initiative by knocking to make me aware that he is there. He is there. He is available. It's not only that he comes outside my door and stands there. No, I would not even know that if he's there. But he comes and knocks. So he does two things. He takes the initiative and he takes a further initiative. So the reason why Jesus asked this question, hugis genestai, do you want to be made well? Do you want to be healed? Is because he approaches the man as a friend and he respects the freedom of the man. Second, he also wants to gauge the response of the man. How will the man respond? Hugis genestai. Do you want to be healed? And the man responds as we would expect anyone who has been ill for 38 years to respond. I'm a lost case. I'm a gone case. As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be. There is no hope for me. There is no point at all. What is the point? It makes no sense. Let me just continue as I am. I'm happy. I'm okay. I am complacent. So the man does not respond to the question, yes, I want to be healed, or I don't want to be healed. But the man uses Jesus as a board to which to complain. I've got no one with me. Nobody cares for me. Look at me, I'm all alone. The whole community is against me. I don't know what to do. They don't understand me. I've worked so hard. You see, my brothers, you and I are in this boat, complaining. I have no one with me and no one to push me into the water. Before I go, somebody else goes. They are always giving more importance than me. They're always given the positions in the society. They're always made superior. I've never been made superior. They're always been given the principal post. I've never been given principal post. You see? Hugis genestai. I'm asking you, do you want to be made well? And Jesus interprets this response as a cry for help. And that's why he comes in this particular festival in this unique way. The phrase made well, hugies genestai, is repeated 5 times in chapter 5. 5 times. Made well or healed. And then Jesus, in regal style, says to the man, rise, take up your pallet and walk. 3 imperatives. And we know that the man wanted to be healed even though he couldn't say it, and that is understandable. We know that he wanted to be healed because he obeys the command as Jesus said it. He rose, he took up his pallet and walked. And so, my brothers, you are either that man, you are one of those following Jesus, you are by his side, you are experiencing this. But because we are reflecting on our own brokenness, because we are reflecting on our need of healing, my own suggestion would be that you play the role of this paralytic. And while it is likely that you may not have been carrying this ailment for 38 years, while it is likely that your ailment might not even be this paralysis, my suggestion to you would be, here Jesus asks you, no matter how insignificant you might think your ailment is, no matter how small you might think your sickness is, here Jesus asks you this. Hugis genestai. Do you want to be made well? And notice, you have to respond at least in some way. You might complain and you might say, Lord, for so many years now, so many have tried and they have not succeeded. Lord, for so many years now, I have been carrying this hurt within me and it has not been able to come out. Lord, for so many years now, this fact has remained with me and there has been no change. And even as you say that, the Lord will say those 3 imperatives to you. Rise or stand up. Take up your mat and walk. And like the paralytic, I know that you will rise, you will take up your mat, and you will walk. In this connection, my brothers, the second part of this talk is about the two examinations, number 24 to 31 of the exercises, the particular examination of consciousness. It is very likely that we do these examines outside the retreat on a regular basis, twice a day or once a day. And I'm saying that's fantastic if you do it. Congratulations to you. But my strong suggestion is that we do these examinations even and especially within the retreat. Let me explain very briefly what this particular examination of consciousness is in number 24 and continuing up to number 31. In number 24, when you awake in the morning, let us say that you are now in your paralysis, or you are in your blindness, or you are in your lameness, or you are dumbness, or your deafness. One of these five, or even another. You are trying to tackle this particular area. Maybe your resentment, maybe your envy, maybe you're getting angry too easily, maybe you're getting irritated at the drop of a hat, maybe any of these things, which you notice can happen even during the retreat. So, for example, the talk is going on or the Eucharist is going on, and suddenly the power goes off, and I've gone off. And you get irritated, immediately irritated. Oh my God, the Mass is now interrupted, or the talk is now interrupted. So you notice this is your area. You got to check. So this is the particular area, your irritation, you're giving in so quickly to irritation, or your anger, or your jealousy, or your resentment, or your hurt, or whatever. Let this be at the top of your mind. You wake up in the morning and you ask for God's grace to guard against this particular challenge. I prefer to call it challenge rather than weakness or shortcoming. And after lunch, you'll make the first prayer for awareness and then examine how many times from the time you arose till the time you are having your lunch or had your lunch, how many times did you give in to this irritation, this shortcoming, this challenge? And preferably, you do it hour by hour, or half hour, or 15 minutes by 15 minutes. That is what number 25 would say. And then the second time you do it is after supper. The same procedure is repeated after supper. But however, in the procedure after supper, what you do is you compare this time, that is from after lunch to after supper, you compare it with the time from morning to lunch. So for example, morning to lunch, I gave into this particular challenge 5 times. From lunch to supper, I gave into it only 3 times. Okay, make a note. Note it down. On the second day, you do the same. And compare the second day with the first day. And then at the end of the week, you do the same and compare the first week with the second week, and so on. The second kind of examination, my brothers, is the general examination. And I see that there are 6 steps in this general examination, which I'm going to suggest to you. And the general examination is for the entire area of your life, who you are as an individual. And the first in these 6 steps is thanksgiving. And when I say thanksgiving, it is a realization of everything as a gift. All I have, all I am, all I will be is a gift of God, is a grace of God. I can do nothing on my own. It is the Lord who has been gracious to me, the Lord who has been generous to me. And so my response can only be gratitude. The second step is praying for grace. Because we can do nothing on our own, we are in constant need of God's grace to do whatever we do. And this grace is given as a gift and given freely, but it depends on my openness. If I come to the Lord with a small vessel to receive that grace, that is all that I will receive. And so in the second step, my prayer, my plea will be, my petition will be, Lord, open my heart to receive your grace. And the third step is the examination of consciousness. This can be done in a variety of ways. I'm going to suggest two ways to you, two practical ways of doing your examination of consciousness, and then there will be a starting point for you to see other ways. The first way is what Ignatius himself tells us: thought, word, and action, or thought, word, and deed. The three steps. I go through my thoughts, and it is my thoughts that are more important than my words and my deeds, because I believe that my words and my deeds flow from my thoughts. So what kind of thoughts did I have? How many times did I give in to negative thoughts, to demeaning thoughts, to thoughts which pulled me down, and in my thoughts in which I pulled others down? Thoughts of jealousy, thoughts of envy, thoughts of self-loathing, thoughts of looking at myself in a negative manner and looking at others in a negative manner. During these days, hopefully, you will not be speaking to anyone, and so words and deeds are not as important. But thought, word, and deed is one way. A second way which I would suggest you can examine is this. Take up 1 Corinthians 13, verses 1 to 4. The first letter of Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 13, verses 1 to 4. In those verses, Paul enumerates a number of qualities about love. He tells us what love is. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Love rejoices in the truth. So look at those beautiful qualities and ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, where am I? Love is patient. On a scale of 1 to 10, am I 6 or am I 7 or am I 3 or 1? Love is kind. On a scale of 1 to 10, where am I with regard to kindness? Where am I with regard to not keeping a record of wrongs? Where am I with regard to enhancing others, boosting others, thinking well of others? So on a scale of 1 to 10, you can take up these qualities. These are starting points for the third step, which is examination of my consciousness. The fourth is, I express my dependence on God. Why? Because when I look at that scale, when I look at kindness, when I look at enhancement, when I look at patience, I find I have a long way to go. I am 3 on a scale of 10. 3, I have got 7 more to go. And that's why the fourth step, I express my dependence on God. Mark chapter 9, verses 35 to 37. Mark chapter 9, verses 35 to 37. Jesus is giving his disciples a lesson about the kingdom. And he does not say too much, because notice it is only 3 verses. Mark 9, 35, 36, 37. You know what he does in the lesson? He brings a child. He brings the child and makes the child stand in front of them. That's all he does. And what exactly is the lesson that the child gives the disciples, besides spontaneity, besides innocence, besides any kind of thing? The child gives the disciples the lesson which shows that the child is dependent. The foremost quality of a child at the time of Jesus was dependence. Children at the time of Jesus did not have to be seen, surely, and did not even have to be heard. So the bringing of a child is revolutionary, is radical. And that's why when the parents want to bring children to Jesus, the disciples are angry and they push them away. In Mark chapter 10, verses 13 to 16. And Jesus is indignant with the disciples and invites the children once again, because he is clear that it is to such people that the kingdom belongs. And primarily, the quality which is being pointed out to in the child at the time of Jesus was dependence. And so I acknowledge my dependence. In the fifth step, I make a resolution. And I make the resolution with hope. Because my God is a God of hope. My God is a God of love. My God is a God who is by my side, as he showed in this beautiful miracle, the healing of the paralytic at the pool of Bethesda. So I make my resolution. Yes, I am going to make an attempt to be a better person in the next half day. And sixth, I conclude with a prayer of confidence in God's mercy, in God's love. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as night the day. Thou canst then be false to anyone. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.